Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to wait a couple minutes here. I can see that we've got about 20 people in, so I'm going to wait until we get a few more viewers here, and then we're going to get started into our forum. Okay. All right, we're going to get started here. Thank you all for being here. We are having a 7th grade forum for the book that you all are going to start reading, if you didn't know already, is Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. And so in anticipation of this, we wanted to set up an opportunity to have a discussion around some of the themes in the book, around racism and social injustice, and some of the other things having to do with a lot that's actually going on in current times, as well as in the setting of this book. And so I want to thank the language arts teachers, Miss Paulicki, Miss O'Connor, Miss Wagner, and Miss Velasio for making sure that this happened and that students had this opportunity. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. So give me 2 seconds here to get started on our Pear Deck. And we're going to roll in and hopefully see some familiar faces, and panelists can introduce themselves as they go if you are unsure of who they might be. Okay. So we also have some student moderators that are here that are going to help lead this discussion. So the first one I'm going to add in here is Amelia. Make sure you go ahead and unmute yourself and you can get started with the first question.
Okay, so hi, I'm Amelia. I'm in 7th grade and I'm in Miss Velasio's language arts class. And then the question is, what has your experience been like as a Black educator? Has it changed since you started? If so, what has changed?
Okay, I'll jump in here. So this is Principal Adams. I think that my experience as a Black educator has taken, I've gone through many ups and downs, right? I think that when I first started my career, I worked in Florida. I was the only Black person, only Black teacher in the school. And that was a challenge for me, just because there was nobody around who looked like me, who had the same experiences as me. And, I felt sometimes that because I was a Black teacher that some of the other educators didn't think that I knew what I was doing or didn't support me the way that I needed to be supported in that particular situation. So I think that was difficult, starting my career that way. I think that continues to be a challenge, especially because I'm new here in Denver. Well, I shouldn't say that I'm new here in Denver. I've been in Denver for about 7 years. And being an educator here in Denver has also those same experiences continue to plague me, especially now going from a classroom teacher to a principal. I think that some of the anxiety that I had as a beginning teacher, being the only teacher of color, only Black male, that anxiety continues to plague me. And it's a little bit more stressful as the principal because I feel like I have to rise or be better than, because I feel like I'm going to be judged if I don't rise to a certain standard. And so that's something that continues to haunt me as I lead. And obviously, I've been able to show that I'm a great educator. I feel good about the things that I do for students, the things that I do for teachers. But sometimes, right, because that inner part of me tells me, oh, you've got to do better, or else they're going to judge you or think that you can't do this because you're Black, right? That continues to be something that I struggle with or try to counter as I lead here in Denver, Colorado, being one of very few Black school leaders. That's something that I continue to always think about. I think another piece for me that I think about as being a Black educator, and there's a lot of research out there that talks about many times Black educators are reduced to being the people who handle behavior in schools and not the people who are able to teach kids the way that they need to be taught. And so something that I continue to think about is, how do I provide opportunities for Black educators to be those who are in positions to influence what happens in our classrooms? And so I think that because we're often limited to only handling discipline, I want to change the narrative of what people think of Black educators and what they can do to ensure that our students are learning and have the greatest outcomes for their success. So that's my experience. Thanks for asking that question, Amelia.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Hi, Amelia and other students. Good afternoon. Mr. Norman, your Assistant Principal of Student Support. And so I'm going to answer that same question. As a Black educator, my experience has been incredible. I can remember when I first began teaching and those relationships that I build with students and families still exist today. Families knew that I would hold their students to high expectations and would not falter. And students truly respected me. They knew that I had their best interests in mind. And so when it came to a lot of the discipline issues that other teachers would see and exhibit, I wouldn't see that because students knew, like I said, that I had their best interests in mind. I also had a group of students that I mentor outside of school. And so every other weekend, I would take them out to eat. We would go to museums, tour college campuses, just ensuring that they have fun and felt as if they had someone they could depend on at all times. Now, my role has changed multiple times throughout the years, but of course, students are still at the core of my work. But now I serve as an advocate for students, staff, and families as Assistant Principal of Student Support. And very similar to what Principal Adams just mentioned, with that, my lens is now much broader. And of course, the expectations are much higher. And it can be sometimes difficult because this role requires me to have some difficult conversations with adults at times, right? Because we must place ourselves in positions or do things we wouldn't do otherwise because it's what's best for you all as students. As a Black school leader here in Denver specifically, I always demonstrate my passion first and foremost, right? Like your passion has to shine through. And also my professionalism. Because Black and all students deserve that each and every day. And of course, I do this while it's still enduring the hardships, right? When we look at everything that's going on in social media as it pertains to the Black culture right now, right? A lot of the inequities. I am a Black male enduring those same hardships, but also leading and advocating for not only for students who look like me, but all students, not just necessarily those staff members that look like me, but all staff members. And again, not just those family members who look like me, but all family members as well. So very interesting.
Thank you. And then last up, Director Buggs.
Good afternoon. I am Shawanda Buggs, and I'm the Director of Instructional Excellence here. And my experience as a Black educator in the Denver Public Schools is a lot like Principal Adams' experience, but my only drawback was not only am I a product of DPS, but I've been in Denver Public Schools my entire career. So I've worked at other places, but this is the longest place that I've ever worked. So has it changed since I've started? Yes, it has. So my first career in the Denver Public Schools was not a teacher, but a clerk in the elementary school. And then I went on to be secretary in the administration building. So the change came about as being the only young Black female in the administration building amongst white coworkers, and having to learn how to do my job because they refused to help me. So, and I still carry that with me now, that if I don't know something, I research and I find out how I can do my job better, or what can I contribute to my job? So it's really changed from being and excuse the term, but it was a known term back when I started in the district. It was the good old boys club down at the administration building. And what that meant is that no one of color would ever have an opportunity to be in the administration building because they only wanted white individuals working in the administration building. So what changed is we actually had the opportunity to have the first Black female superintendent, Dr. Evie Dennis, as the superintendent for the district. So a lot of change came about when she became superintendent in the district. So just even moving forward, going from being in school, not seeing a lot of school leaders of color, not seeing a number of teachers of color in the classroom, and just gradually seeing more and more the increase of people of color being in the education system, people that look like me, that they have the same experiences as that I've had. So it has changed, but there are some things that are still the same. So as we continue to push forward to have our Black Excellence plan in place and support our students, I'm looking forward to that. And just being a part of this forum is the start that we need. So thank you so much for asking that question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, all teachers. Okay, then the next question. In your opinion, what is the difference between the terms African American and Black? Which do you prefer when it comes to your identity? And then Ms. Bradshaw, you're going first.
Oh, I'm on a delay. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Say hi, everybody. So the terms African American and Black, I identify myself as Black. I am a Black woman. Why? Because African American is the politically correct way to reference a Black person when they walk into a room. And because I don't know my heritage back to Africa, I don't necessarily connect with that term African American. But I have it in my pot of who I am because I am a Black woman. But as African American, once I can trace my history back to Africa, then I would embrace it more. But my last name is European. And so, I can't even trace my last name back to Africa. And we all know why, because of slavery, right? And things of that sort. And so, again, when you see me, when I walk into a room, I am okay with you calling me a Black woman. I'm okay with the term Black. I am more comfortable with that term as opposed to African American. And again, like I said, African American is part of who I am, but it doesn't make up who I am when I walk into a room. So again, I prefer to be a Black woman. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Next answer will be Miss Lucinda.
Hi, everybody. My name is Miss Lucinda, and I am the office support to the student support team here at Hill Campus. The question is about African Americans. So, I kind of looked it up just to see exactly what they consider African American. And the dictionary's definition of African American is an American of African and especially of Black African descent. So the adoption of the term African American for me means that it's a very deliberate move on the part of our Black community to signify our Americanness and also to signify the African heritage. But what that means for me is that for a long time in our country's history, Black people were more likely direct descendants of enslaved people. And so that's what African American means to me. But as for Black is a term that was used as a sense of pride, a sense of empowerment during the so-called Black Power movement in the 60s and 70s, which the era that I grew up in. But Black isn't perfect by no means. But as for me, the value of Black is that it carries the same potent combination of pride, remembrance, and regret that the so-called African American is designed for. So for me, when you say Black, I don't see any negativity. I don't see no ambiguity. There is a sense of quality of being and openness, for a better word of interpretation. So for me, Black American is the term I would choose to identify, because truly there's no term that truly describes people that were taken from Africa and forced into slavery. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
All right, let's take a quick moment to everybody that's tuned into the Pear Deck, which is 100 viewers. So we'd like to hear a little bit from you. And so the question that we're posing here is there a feature or part of your identity you feel like you need to hide? And so right with this, there's a yes or no option. I'm going to show those answers in just a moment. But again, an opportunity for you all to think through something that people of color and Black people think through a lot, if that inability to hide your identity or to hide the color of your skin. And so just thinking about some of the things we are able to hide and some of the things we aren't able to hide, and how that affects us and how we move through this world and in this society. And so just think and reflect for yourself for just a moment about things that you like to hide, can't hide, would like to hide if you could. And I'm going to take a look at those results in just a second, and then we'll move on to our next panelist. All right. A few more seconds for folks to tune in here. Again, is there a feature or part of your identity you feel like you need to hide? It's pretty comforting to hear that a majority at this moment feel like they don't need to hide any part of their identity, and that's definitely a privilege for sure. But I can see some fluctuating there around about 30 people or so, 32 now, that are feeling like, yes, there is something that they have to hide. All right, about 10 more seconds. And give everybody a chance to tune in. And you guys can see obviously the answers fluctuating here, but again, a majority of folks saying no. And again, as you guys go back to your language arts classes and have a chance to dissect a little more of this in the coming weeks, right? I'd love to hear from some of the people that say no, some of the people that say yes, and what are those things that you feel like you need to hide or not hide, and why? So think about that as you read through this book and as you explore yourself deeper in the coming weeks reading this literature. Okay. Excellent. All right, we're going to get back on, and I'm going to have our next moderator bring in our next question. And just a reminder again to our panelists that we are going to try to keep our answers to about 2 minutes or less, just so we can make sure we're all, have a chance to get through all of these really valuable questions. So we're going to start again in just a moment with 2 seconds to add everybody in.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jaleesa, and I am Miss O'Connor's moderator. And the third question is, our book is set in the segregated and racist state of Mississippi in the 1930s. Why do you believe is it important to still read this in the school year of 2021? First, we're gonna have Miss Lucinda answer.
Okay, thank you, Jaleesa. I think it's important to still read the book in this school year of 2021 because it's a powerful novel, and it introduces young minds to difficult and horrific nature of racism that is unfortunately still going on today. It also creates an insightful discussion like we're doing now about how a novel, Jaleesa, that was written a half a century ago continues to have a current conversation about race in America today. And so I was doing a little research on the book, and what stuck out with me is about the family. Through all the tremendous adversities that the characters face in this book, the importance of family still seems to trump about everything else. And a person's devotion and loyalty to their family can often motivate everything else that we do in our lives. And so it's so important to me to this day. Family is very important. And then we have the justice portion of the book. The novel demonstrates in many injustices that we as, I would identify myself as Black Americans living in the South face like in the 1930s, and the way in which both adults and children had to cope with them in their everyday lives, which again is still going on every day, is just awesome to me. And so the characters, they had to choose between sacrificing and maintaining their self-respect. And self-respect is everything, and it should be valued today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lucinda. Next up, we have Principal Adams.
Hey, Jaleesa and everybody. I think that, learning about your history is important because it prevents us from making hopefully it prevents us from making the same mistakes in our future. I think that with the current climate of our nation, we seem to be repeating, right, some of the same mistakes that were made in the past, where, in the past they were a little bit more in your face, but now things are done a little bit more less in your face or less overtly, right? So you think about all of the shootings where we've seen so many Black men die. You think about some of the situations or the challenges that you have heard from Ms. Buggs, myself, talk about as school leaders, still facing racist types of behavior. And so I think it's important for us to continue to analyze, right, what we can do to better support all people, right, and be okay with having conversations about race. When we are okay and have conversations openly about race, we can learn from each other, and we can use what we've learned to be more empathetic, right, so that we can get along with each other a little bit more. When there are people who continue to say that racism is not an issue, that continues to be the reason why we have to have these conversations, because it is real, and we still, and I'm speaking from my point of view as a Black man, is still facing racist behaviors today. So if we don't know what happened in our past, we'll continue to have to fight against those things as in our present day and in our future. So this story is meant for us to understand what happened so that we can ensure that we as global citizens, when you leave Hill and you become citizens, that you're able to not perpetuate these ideas or ideologies that continue to plague and marginalize Black Americans.
I completely agree with you that we need to learn about our history. Last but not least, Ms. Director Buggs.
Hi, Jaleesa. So the reason I think it's important for you all to read this novel is because the more history changes, the more it remains the same. So when you think about the experiences that the characters are going through in the book, how can you align those with the experiences that are happening today? So then understanding that racism isn't a new thing, it's just now more prevalent, and we have video cameras and it's being recorded. So these are the same things that were happening during the time when this book was written, but now it's more in our faces. And now it's like, okay, what are we gonna do to change? And like Principal Adams just said, how are we not going to perpetuate racism? What are we gonna do differently than what was done in the past? So I just think it's very important for students to align, you know, our history with what's going on in the world now, and how are we going to be that change so that racism is no longer a thing, but we're still having those conversations about racism, but it's not bringing people to be angry about it, but to bring forth change. So how can we come together as a people and change racism? So now that that's like a thing that's no longer the big thing that we focus on, but it's something minor, like, hey, we don't do that here anymore. So that's why I think it's important that we continue to have you all read stories about your past history.
Thank you for your answer. Question 4. This is the last question I'm going to be asking. What connections do books that address segregation have to the present day? First, we're going to have
everybody. First off, my name is Mr. Turner. I'm the restorative practice coordinator here at Hill. But some of the things that I like to talk about in regards to segregation that have connections from books in the past to now, I would say that we're still segregated in a sense. The race of Black Americans are still segregated, not having the same privileges and some of the advantages of those of different races. But one thing that sticks out to my mind in regards to segregation is a little bit more subtle, but it's still very prevalent and relevant. Just in my experience, just living, being 24 years old, I can see that we're still segregated in the sense of finances, in the sense of, you know, neighborhoods that we live in, things like that. That's something that I can relate to personally. And some of the things that are still prevalent from, you know, the history of what's been going on. Like we hear about, you know, when it comes to race, Blacks weren't allowed to use the same bathrooms, water fountains, things like that. It was definitely separated and segregated just by the color of your skin. But now today, in present day, although it's not necessarily as prevalent as a Black and white thing, it's just something as simple as, you know, the careers that we pursue, or some of the talents that we have, and that we're only supposed to follow this sort of pathway, or we're only, you know, allowed to do this certain thing or take this certain path to get somewhere. I think that is definitely segregated in that, and that we're looked upon in a light that doesn't have the privileges of other, you know, races. But in terms of segregation, I think it's still connected from history to today. And although it's not as, you know, obvious and relevant, I think that it's very subtle, but yet still prevalent in today. So that's what I have for segregation.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. I completely agree with you. Next, Miss Lily Brown.
Hey guys. So I think that for me personally, it serves as a reminder of the sacrifices that Black people and other people that were allies for us.
Miss, your mic, your volume's like down. I can't really hear you.
Can you guys hear me now?
No, not really. It's still like the volume's low. But if that's the best of the volume you can get, then that's okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
That's better? Okay. Okay. So I think that it serves as a place for me to be able to look back and remember the sacrifices that these amazing people made in very difficult times. And it helps me personally to spur me to action and remember my why behind what I'm doing here in education, what I'm doing in my personal life, and really wanting to honor what people fought for me to be able to have certain opportunities. For my family, growing up in the South, like I think I got, actually growing up on the East Coast too, like growing up in both, I got very different views of subtle racism at the age that I am. And so, yeah, I think it creates power and push for me to always strive to do better and create opportunities for other students of color.
Thank you. Mr. Assistant Principal Norman, last but not least.
Yes, I am back. Hi, Jaleesa. So books that address segregation give insight into past experiences, as well as to the current thinkings and emotions of those impacted individuals currently. So for example, when we all learned about the Green Book, this is a topic that I'm highly interested in and passionate about. So just as Mr. Turner mentioned, in past times, Blacks couldn't use certain restrooms or eat at certain places. And so we learned that this Green Book was like a safeguard or a safe way. It detailed those places where Blacks could go to be treated equally. And we also learned that these Green Books were sold at what was formerly known as the Exxon gas stations, which are now the Exxon gas stations. And so although these gas stations are not prominent in Colorado, I make sure as a Black male that I purchase gas from those gas stations whenever I am on the East Coast, simply because of the support that they provided to my Black people in the past. And so as a whole, these books remind us of the progress that we've made, but unfortunately, they give light to the work that still needs to be done to ensure the proper treatment of all Black individuals.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for your answers.
Awesome. Thank you, Jaleesa. We have another Pear Deck question. So students, go ahead back to your Pear Deck, and this one actually is going to ask for some a written response. So as a young person, our 7th grade students, have you experienced any racism or discrimination? In this last question, we've been able to hear a little bit about some adults in the building have been on this earth a little long, but I think what we heard and made clear was that it's still happening today. And so if you have an answer to that, and it could be no, but if it's yes, you can write yes and write a little description or maybe a little bit about that experience, because I think it's important that others see that what their peers' experiences might be like. So I'm going to wait a couple moments and then show the responses, but obviously please be sensitive and respectful in your responses, all right? All right. So I'm just going to scroll through some of our answers here. We have some no's, some discrimination as a young woman or girl and as a younger person. Another no, have not experienced it myself, but I've heard about instances where Black people or people of other races other than white have been refused service or given less. Haven't had to deal with discrimination, but I'm very privileged to not have dealt with any of this. Thank you for saying that. Luckily, I haven't, not towards me, but have seen discrimination of women and Black people and Latinos. I've experienced other people. No, no, no. I'm very blessed to have white privilege. Most people think I'm white because of my skin color and appear to be, some people call me a little white girl. Okay, so that's a bit of the opposite, right? Experiencing maybe a little bit of privilege because people might misinterpret or see you a different way than you identify. And that's an important discussion to have as well. Once I was in the car with my father, he got pulled over and handcuffed because the police thought he was smuggling something when he definitely was not. Yes, me and my dad. One time I was going to the store and I was approached by people who thought I was stealing. We were younger, so even younger than 7th grade. As a young person who is half Black but has the appearance of a white person, I faced racism, but not in a normal way. By this, I mean I am too white to be a Black person, but I'm not white enough to be white. It's very confusing. Some very, very real comments here. And again, it's important that everyone knows that these are your peers, your 7th grade brothers and sisters here at Hill that are having these experiences. And so keep this in mind as you move and you share and you're vulnerable. through exploring this book, and be ready to hear and learn about yourself and others for sure. I'm going to read just a couple more, and we're going to get back to the questions. My sister has a disability, and so the R word can be very sad to hear. Absolutely, absolutely. One of the times it was by an older woman. I think she was doing it on purpose just because I'm a child that wouldn't understand that she was being racist. I'm sure I will in the future, right? And so we're having these discussions to hopefully start to ensure that that's not happening to our young people as they get older. Discrimination as a girl. On the internet can be a tough place to get some of that. For medical conditions, you can be discriminated against. Yes, I have in a classroom. All right, that's an important reason why we're having this conversation as well. What do our classrooms look like? Do you feel safe here at Hill and in school in Denver? Sorry, I should be reading out loud. Obviously, there's a longer response here that I was just reflecting on. People can still be racist, maybe not directly towards me. I'm very lucky to have white privilege. I feel as though because white people are not discriminated against as much, they think they may have they may make a racist comment towards white people and it doesn't count, but it can still hurt. Thank you for writing that comment. Okay. We have many, 104 responses. So thank you all so much for typing your comments in here. We've got some pretty charged questions coming up too, so I want to make sure we get to those. So I'm going to add Maggie in, and she is going to introduce our next question. Give me 1 second to get there on the slide deck. All right, all you, Maggie. Maggie, and she is going to.
Okay, hello, hi Maggie, I'm Miss Keys.
Are you there? Are you there, Maggie? Might want to step out if you're in the classroom and they're projecting it because there's a lag. So if you want to step to maybe the back room or in the hallway.
Yeah, can you not hear me?
Now I can. Do you want to go ahead and read the question one more time? They're projecting it. You want to step to maybe the back room or in the hallway.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Give us a second, Maggie will pop in here.
Sorry about that. So I'm Maggie, and question 5 is, how does the N-word have different
I think she accidentally muted herself, but go ahead, Miss Lucinda. How does the N-word have different meanings throughout history?
Okay, so I'm a researcher, so I kind of have a brief description of how it started. So the word originated in the 18th century as an adaptation of a Spanish word, Negro. a descendant of the Latin adjective niger, Niger, which means black. And so over time, it took a derogatory connotation. And by the mid 20th century, particularly in the US of A, its usage by anyone other than a black person had come to be generally seen as a racist insult. And so black people, as a black people, we have successfully divested the N-word of its original offense. And in our struggle to survive this devastation that it causes, we gave it a new meaning, made it approachable, made it survivable. And so the word is being policed because black people did not have a choice in the matter at a certain time when it was used to their disadvantage and it was abused. And so we ascribed and we reinforced the sense of black people as inferior by white people. And so the word for me, it survived. It's an act of redemption for the black person. The word survived on the condition that black people have inscribed it. We took it to heart. And so nobody else that's other than black can use it. And so now it becomes violent when other people try to use it or try to take it. And so that's what I think how it evolved throughout history.
Hi, Maggie. So to answer the question, how the N-word have different meanings throughout history. So going even further with the definition. So if you look up the N-word, the definition was for someone that doesn't know something, that they're ignorant to knowing something. So when we think back to how our ancestors came to America, yes, they did not know. They did not know the ways of living in America. So, of course, that word was attached to our ancestors when they were brought to America. And like Ms. Lucinda said, that has transpired over time into a very derogatory term to identify Black people or African Americans. And then during the Civil Rights Movement, that word was still being used to identify African Americans or people of color, even with that definition attached of not knowing or ignorant to something. So when we think about that, and when we think about the use of the N-word, that's from generations from people using that word as a derogatory term to identify people of color. And like Ms. Lucinda said, now we have learned to use that word as a form of survival. So over time, and I mean, even now, the young kids, they don't look at that word or they don't use that word to identify anybody of color. They use that word to identify their friends. It's like fun banter back and forth. They're using the N-word. So, and you hear it in rap songs all the time. So it's not seen as derogatory for younger people. But when you think about the word from how it came about, yes, it has been a derogatory term. And to say that our young people don't understand, I think they understand. They're just choosing not to use that word or identify their friends or their families in a derogatory term. It's used as a terms of endearment. So to me, that is my definition of how that word has evolved and changed over a course of generation after generation.
Maggie, I'm just gonna add on just really quickly. So I want to make sure that we understand. For me, there are people who use this word, people of color who use this word. And I think Ms. Bugs took the words right out of my mouth. This idea that we have reclaimed this word, and for somebody outside of the Black race to dictate whether or not it's appropriate for us to use the word is almost, again, trying to exert power over us to tell us how we should use that word. And people outside of the Black race don't have that right anymore because we have claimed that word and use it the way that we want to use it in our culture. Now, as a Black person, I choose not to use the word in public, right? And it's not something that I have in my vernacular, but that's a choice that I have made. And so when you talk about and when you encounter this word in your reading, I want you all to know that there may possibly be some feelings that are evoked because of the way that this word is used in the text. And that there are some people who have different meanings or understanding of what this word means to them. And I'm talking specifically about students who are Black. This might be a word that they hear used in their homes or that their cousins may use, right? And again, it's because we as a Black culture have claimed or reclaimed what that word means for us, and will not allow any other person outside of the Black race to dictate to us how it should be used moving forward. So I think that it's important for us to understand the complexities around that word. And I think that you all are at an age where you can understand that complexity and how the use of this word was at first put on us, right, and used to degrade us, and now we have risen above it and now have claimed it for our own use within our culture.
Go ahead and unmute yourself, Jordan, if you can, and then there we go.
Yeah. So I'm Jordan from Miss Wagner's fourth book class. And okay. So the question is, how does the N-word have different meanings based on who uses it in the space they're in? And first up is Director Lewis.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Director Lewis, and
So the question is, how does the N-word have different meanings based on who uses it in the space they're in? And first up is Director Lewis.
Good afternoon. The lag kind of threw me off a little bit. Good afternoon, this is Director Lewis. Just happy to be a part of this forum. And so I would love to answer this question. How does the N-word have a different meaning based on who uses it in the space they're in? From my experiences, I've noticed that coming from a background of sports where, listening to music to get, prepared for a basketball game. Good afternoon, this is Director Lewis. Just happy to be a part of this forum. And so I would love to answer this question. How does the N-word have a different meaning based on who uses it? Perfect. So I noticed in different spaces, people feel comfortable depending on who they're around. And so I know for me, growing up, playing sports, listening to music, and people feeling comfortable as teammates, feel comfortable saying words that they may not say in other spaces. And so when I was younger, I would probably just let it slide and not think nothing of it. But the older I've gotten and the more, I guess I would say, respect and knowledge from my older relatives or colleagues and things like that, and having some context around how they feel about the word in general gave me a different perspective of then challenging other people not to use those words, and also challenging myself not to use those words in those public settings. Yes, around family, the word is used in terms of endearment, but just for me, if I don't, if I want to challenge people not to use the N word, I feel like in those public spaces, I shouldn't use it, because I think that holds a lot of power in people respecting you not wanting to hear those words. And so for me, that's just kind of what I do, is like, if I hear it, I say, hey, please be mindful of that word and what that word, the root word, and where it comes from. And I usually say, like, you don't hear me talking like that. You don't hear that word coming out of my mouth. So I just ask that you respect my space and not use that word. And so for me, it's just really trying to respect for those who came before us and what they had to go through around those words, and having, not allowing the word to have power in a negative mindset, but also giving power to one another to respect each other's space.
Thank you so much, Jordan and Director Lewis. We are out of time here, about 15 seconds from dismissal. So I want to thank everybody for participating and having an ear and listening and being willing to learn. And I hope these valuable discussions continue as you all start this book and start to really dive into some of these topics. So please know you can reach out or chat with, email, talk to anybody that was here today, including your peers, about some of these to go a little further and deeper. And I hope that you guys enjoy the book and continuing to learn in this space. So have a wonderful afternoon and be great.